All right, folks, here we go with the notes for chapter 13, talking about long-form narration, and especially talking about things like corporate narration and medical narration, especially. E-learning kind of goes into this talk as well. As you perform a corporate or narrative script, you are still performing a character that is telling a story, just as you are for any other type of copy. Many times when we read these kinds of scripts, they tend to be a little more bland, maybe not as compelling in terms of telling a story as we generally think about telling a story. But whenever there's a narrative, there's a story nonetheless. So all the things that we have learned concerning characterization, how we give voice to that characterization, it all still applies. So you should know who your character is, who you are talking to, and what you are talking about. It's in addition to understanding your character, going back to those two core questions that we talk about in communication, no matter what sort of communication it is. What is your message, and who is your audience? Now, the message aspect, depending on your knowledge in a particular subject, you very well may find yourself in a situation where you are reading about something that really you don't have a lot of expertise on. It's okay, because you can still kind of do some research, try to make some headway in terms of what it is that you're talking about. You can use some of the tactics that we've talked about in previous chapters about taking words that you don't understand and substituting an idea or a concept that you do understand and trying to find the correct way to give voice to those sentences once you get a grasp of what it is that the statement is trying to say. Now, you will also need to find a way to create a presence of knowledge and authority for your character. So the big thing here is, what is it about your character that gives him or her the authority to be speaking the words that is being spoken? Is it an employee of the company? Is it the CEO? Is it an expert in the field? Who is it that you are giving voice to? And based on that, try to picture yourself in that scenario where you are that person and how that person would deliver the particular message that is in front of you. Now, as far as medical narration and e-learning in particular, these types of scripts are loaded with incredibly complex phrasing and wording. These scripts lend themselves more to that of a lecture than that of a conversation. So it can be difficult to, again, try to find that voice in terms of relating a story as opposed to trying to be more of an orator. However, the information is important, and the audience must be able to relate to the presentation as well as be able to clearly understand what it is that they hear. This is that idea of really understanding your audience and what you're trying to do in terms of presenting that material is you're trying to meet the audience where it is at. It's possible they will understand some of the terminology depending on who the audience is that this script is for. So it may not be as big of a deal as long as you can present yourself in such a way that you make them believe that you understand what it is that you're saying. But if it's for a more general audience, then it may be important when you come to certain terminology and certain concepts that you either slow down as you explain those things or work with those that have hired you to read that script to be able to maybe insert some things that help to explain things a little better, to make the language a little more common, whatever it takes there. However, that is something that you have to work very closely with your producers, with your clients, with those that wrote the script to make sure that you are still speaking truth when it comes to reading those scripts if you do change any wording or any order of wording for that matter. So here's some tips for performing corporate and narrative copy. Talk to the audience on their level. Meet them where they're at. You must know who you are talking to, and therefore be able to give the voice that it needs, like I was explaining just a little bit ago. Take your time delivering the copy. There's rarely going to be a time limitation when you're doing these types of scripts. It's not like you have to read it within 30 seconds or 60 seconds or what have you. Generally, the goal here is to get the message out and to take the proper time that is necessary to get that message out. Be clear on the facts and on the pronunciation of complex words. If you don't know how to pronounce something, ask. There's no shame in asking. Slow your delivery or your pace in sections where there is important information, especially if you're going through a bunch of lists or a bunch of complex terms. Those are things that you want to slow down and make sure that you get out correctly and get out at a speed and a tempo at which people can process that information in the way that they need to. Finally, be careful to not overlap or step on any other performer's lines. There may be instances where you are reading something where you are one voice of 2 or 3 or more, and there's a reason for the staggered reading. Make sure that you're doing that in such a way that you're not stepping over top of someone else's lines or outperforming somebody else. Because here, it's not so much about the performance as much as it is about the information. However, the performance is going to help to relay the information. Some other challenges of medical narration. One of the greatest rewards in medical narration is repeat business. Once a client finds a talent who can confidently and competently rise to the challenge, he or she usually comes back time and time again. If this is something that you look to do and are able to do it well, you will most likely find steady work in this field. Going back to pronunciation, it is a hard thing to do. There's a lot of terminology that is used that doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue, but you can find out how to say the words and practice saying them until it does become second nature for you to be able to speak them. I remember one time when I was working as a reporter for a news and traffic service that there was a commercial copy that we had to read for the drug Flonase, and the proper name for Flonase is fluticasone furoate. Now, we had to actually submit recordings of us practicing how to say fluticasone furoate because the client was very adamant that we got that pronunciation correct. And I remember having to go to the mic and do several takes of that term to make sure I could properly say fluticasone furoate. It's possible that you might be in a similar situation. The real challenge in medical narration is telling the story. The terminology is so difficult, the subject matter foreign to many people. Sometimes the narrator can't see the story past all the mumbo jumbo. However, don't let the words get in the way. Don't get so wrapped up in the medical that you can't see past it to the underlying message, which is the story. Again, this is one of those opportunities where if you substitute a concept or an idea that you are a little more familiar with, and you put those words in place and you can kind of figure out how the flow of the sentence is supposed to go, that's a very helpful tip for you to be able to read medical copy with foreign subject matter. So, how to approach the medical script. First off, make a note of every word or term that you don't know. Figure out how to pronounce the terms. Make extra sure that you are correctly pronouncing these words. Do everything you need to do. Look things up in a dictionary ask somebody that may know the correct pronunciation, whether it's the client or call up a doctor or a medical professional, whatever it takes. Make sure you get that terminology correct. If you're still unsure how to pronounce a word, do multiple takes with multiple pronunciations so that the client can choose which they would like to have. If you provide that up front, there's less of a chance that you may get a call back asking to do a retake. Then, read the script for the story. There's still a narrative here. There's still a communication that needs to happen. Keep that in mind, despite all the challenges. If you don't know the story, break down the copy until you do know the story. You're still a communicator. You're still putting a message out there. This is paramount that you do this. Once you figure out the pronunciations, once you figure out what the story is, finally tell the story. Don't announce it, because again, you still have to create a relatable experience for the listener. If you announce it, things will simply get turned off in their brains. Communicate with your audience. Meet them where they're at. So there you go. There's chapter 13. Now, at the end of the chapter, there's a few scripts that the author provides as examples. I encourage you to take a look at those, maybe even try reading them and seeing how well you do with them. Once you've spent some time with that, hop on over to the next video and we'll jump into chapter 14.